Zia Chapter 6. Nightfall had come on gently. There was no wind and the sky was clear except for pink streaks in the west where the sun had been. I was trailing one hand in the cool water. Then I shifted across and thwart and trailed my other hand. They were still numb, but they did not hurt so much, and the blood had stopped. Mondo's cry must have been heard by those at the mission, even by those who were asleep. I heard the cry before I saw the fish. "Grande!" shouted Mondo. "Un grande pez espada!" When I saw it first, it was in the air about 50 yards off to our right. It seemed to be standing on the scythe-like tail. The hook that Mondo had made and polished in the workshop had gone into the bone of the fish's underjaw. His sword was longer than my arm, and the thrash of it from side to side in attempt to throw off the hook. With a great splash, he fell back into the water, into the same hole he had come from. "Hold tight," Mondo shouted, "but not too tight. Give him a chance to run." The fish took out some line and jumped again and thrashed his sword, but he did not come in. He took out more line, and we tied it to the bit and gave him the boat again to carry. It was too dark to see now. By the evening star, and then by the position of the Big Bear, the only constellation I knew, I thought we must be moving north and toward the coast. But I was not sure. Even the compass pointed in the right direction. Even in the channel, the night wind was sharp and full of spray. "Do we have tortillas?" Mondo asked. "4 apiece," I said, and handed them up to him. "And water?" I gave him the jug, which was half empty. "Do not drink it like a camel," I cautioned him. "How does a camel drink?" he asked. Mondo felt very good. He was thinking of all the praise he could receive when he got back to the mission. "The camel drinks all the water he can hold," I said, "and then he goes without water for weeks. Sometimes he bursts himself wide open after he drinks so much at one time. The fish will not last for weeks," Mondo said. "He will last through the night. He will go slow now and wait for daylight. Then he will thrash about and put on a big fiesta, and it will be his last." Mondo ate the 4 tortillas, taking his time, and drank one long swig of water. Then he sat for a while. Then he talked, and by the time the moon was overhead, he was asleep, snoring. He was without a worry. I was too tired to sleep, and afraid that we would run ashore either on Santa Cruz Island or the coast. I was not sure where we were. We seemed to be following along the kelp bed that rimmed the island, but I could be wrong. The sea is not a good place to be when you are tired and hungry and worried. At no time is it a place to do foolish things. At the first false dawn, a pearly gray in the east, I was aware that we were no longer moving. We were, as I had thought, near the kelp bed. The line was slack, as if it had been broken. At some time during the night, I could have fallen asleep and the fish could have broken free. I began to take in the line, cautiously at first, and then hand over hand. As it came in, I coiled it carefully in the big barrel. Mondo lay in the bow, one hand trailing in the water, asleep as if he had never slept before. The sun was up by the time I caught the sight of the big fish. He was about 50 boat lengths away and scarcely moving. Only his tail moved, and very slowly. The way the rising sun slanted, he was in the shadow of the boat, but I could see that he was about 3 arms length away. My hand still bled, and I guided the fish up to us. Not forcing him, I crouched in the bottom of the boat, keeping out of sight and making as few movements as possible. I had the line wrapped around my left wrist as I brought him up. a foot at a time, putting my knees on the line as each strip came in. The sun was in Mando's face, but he did not move. He had a wonderful look, as if he were listening to some heavenly music. All I could hear was the surf beating against the shore and the sounds of the waves washing back from the cliffs and caves. The big fish was not a pez espada as Mando thought it to be. His bill was a round spear, very long and curved upward a little. His back was a purple blue, and light blue hands ran from his back to his undersides, which were silver. I had seen marlin before, and this was a marlin, a big one, the size of 3 large men, and almost as long as the boat. The fish stopped, and I held the line softly, not moving, trying not to breathe. The hook was there in his lower jaw and looked solid. He came forward so that his pointed bill was even with the bow of the boat. His tail was barely moving. The big fin on his back caught the sun and showed violet and blue spots. I crouched, watching him. His eyes moved, looking up at the boat and then at me. They were immense, and once they had found me, they did not shift away. In the sun, they looked golden, but they were of 2 different colors, some of the colors that were on his back. His gaze did not move from me. It was strange to look into the eyes of a fish that looked back at you. It seemed to me, as I crouched there, that in his mind he knew that I was the cause of the hook in his mouth and the long fight through the day and dark, and yet I saw no hatred in him, only a sort of wonderment and surprise, and besides, all a look of submission. Mando was sleeping, fighting off a cloud of gnats, but still, in his sleep, I was close enough to him to touch his outstretched foot with mine. I thought of waking him, but feared that he would jump and arouse the fish into a last effort to free itself. The harpoon and a gaff made of a long bamboo rod and iron lay within my reach. I could use either one, or if I thought and planned carefully, I would be able to use both on the great fish. He was now even with the boat, leaning against it as if to rest. I could not see the marlin's eyes any longer, only his purple back and the blue bands running down his sides. But I remembered his eyes and their look of surprise and submission. I could think of nothing else but his eyes looking at me. Mando was asleep on his side, leaning forward. I slipped his long knife from its sheath. I unloosened the line from my wrist and set it down squarely on the gunwale. The knife was sharp, and it went through the line quickly. The big fish had not moved. He did not know yet that he was free. I stood up, and as I did, the boat rocked against him. He started to move away. I tossed the severed line around over the side. The fish saw the movement and began to edge away from the boat. He slanted downward, his fins barely moving. He became a long shadow, and then a small shadow, and was gone. The iron hook in his jaw, the line, would be eaten away in time by the sea, which ate everything. I sat back and for a while watched Mando sleeping. Then I picked up the oars and began to row. The morning was clear, and there was no wind. I headed back up the coast toward the mission of Santa Barbara. In one part of me, I was glad the marlin had come between us and the ocean. Mando was still asleep when we rounded Santa Cruz. It was mid-morning. I gave him a kick in the shins, and he came awake, staring about as if he had no idea where he was, on land or on the sea. But in one glance, he saw that the big fish had gone. He jumped to his feet. What happened? ¿Qué pasa? Mi pez espada, where is he? The line I had cut lay at his feet beside his knife. Mando glanced at the line, at his knife, then at me. He is gone, I said. He left while you were asleep. Mando picked up the line I had cut and looked at me. The line did not fray. It did not break from the fish's strength. The line was cut. He picked up his blade. It was cut with a sharp knife, like this one. I did not know that pez espada carries a knife. They did not carry knives. Only people carry knives, I said. When did we hook the fish? Yesterday in the morning. Then he was with us for almost a day, I said. How would you like to be with a boat for almost a day at the end of a line? With an iron hook in your mouth? Would you like that, Senor Fisherman? How would you like half a day, or perhaps an hour, would suit you better? I am not a fish. If you were, amigo, would you like an iron hook in your mouth? You talk foolish talk, Mando said. People are not fish. But fish also bleed. How would you like the blood for an afternoon, and a night, and a morning? How would the sangre taste, brother Mando? No tiene nada en la cabeza, Mando said, put his knife back in its sheath, and stretched out and to sleep again. Next time I fish among fishermen, he said with the greatest disgust. I have enough in my head, I answered, to know that you are a poor sailor, and when I go out anywhere again, it will be alone. I am still here, he said, looking at me through half-closed eyes. I am still a sailor, about to fall asleep. I am still here, I repeat. We have lost more than a day, but the weather is good. We have enough food. Let us continue what we have begun. I nodded my head. Yet I was afraid of the wind and the wild seas I had seen. I was afraid all over, in my stomach and in my head.